Retirement can seem very far away when you just started working, but by the time you hit 40, you're considered middle age and you're a lot closer to leaving the workforce than you do have left in there if you're looking at retiring at 65. Now, for most of us, including myself, I want to make sure that I have retirement in place, want to make sure I'm on track, making sure I have a really secure retirement, and really knowing how you do stack up against your peers is going to be huge when you compare it to, guess what, your fellow Americans. That's right. When it comes to the average 401k balances, based on the older Americans that are getting ready to retire, and if you're part of the FIRE movement, you might even be retiring before this. But when you start thinking of retiring at 40, what do the balances in those 401k accounts look like? The average balance in there is $344,000. So when you think of the averages, that is pretty good. When you think of where you're at 40s, you still have roughly 25 years of runway until you're getting into utilizing that 401k money. But the interesting is when it comes to the median balances, which is at 151k. So for a lot of people, there are a lot of smaller accounts that do bring that average balance down. But for a lot of people, almost 50% of Americans, there is no retirement, unfortunately, to speak of at this point. But this is honestly the point where a lot of people do start putting it into top of mind, trying to race to recover, and really missing almost 30 years of compounding interest when it comes to the workforce, when it comes to saving out money. Now, when we get into our 50s, the average balance is 558,000. Median balance on this one is 247. So as you can see, again, you're starting to think about retirement. A lot of people are putting more money into those 401k accounts, and the averages have increased in kind of instrumentally have increased. But looking at the 60s, now this is where it gets very interesting. So when you think of the 50s, we're at 558. When you get to 60s, you're at 555. So the average balance of those 401k accounts by the time you reach age 60 has actually reduced. The median balance goes from, of course, in 50s at the 247 to 209. So that means when you're in your 60s, this is the point where people start taking money out of that 401k. So me personally, I am 45. If you think 15 years in the future, that is the point where a lot of people, once you hit that 59 and a half marker, can take a lot of money out of the IRA accounts, a lot of money out of the 401k accounts. And then you get into the 70s. This is where it gets interesting again. Average balance 417 because we're already in retirement and we've started utilizing some of those balances. And the median balance is 103. So when you think from the 60s to the 70s, the median balance goes down almost $105,000 because again, the accounts, especially those smaller accounts, are being used up, they are being closed. So why is there such a very, very big gap between these? It is because the average balances are higher. And of course, it is showing that older Americans are falling short. When you start looking at the median balance, even looking, and I'm sure it doesn't have the data for this, but looking at 70 going into 80, a lot of the median balances are almost to that zero marker because again, people are using those funds. Now this goes right into the belief, Americans believe they need 1.46 million in retirement to recover comfortably. So when you think the average balances is 417, or even before retirement, you're at $500,000, 555,000. 1.46 million. So you're talking, you have a third of the money that the Americans have the expectation to have for retirement to live comfortably. This isn't even looking at, living and really being wealthy during retirement. This is about living comfortably. Now, according to the popular 4% rule, if you're only taking 4% of that nest egg, you don't want to run out of money in 30 years, which is kind of crazy. So if you assume the 401k balance is, of course, that 555,000 at 65 when they retire, that would give you 22k a year. Now, for a majority of individuals where Social Security is 40% of your income, that extra 22 is a little bump with that 4%. And of course, thinking of that, and that is on the average balance is the 550k. So thinking of 22k for the first year, taking that 4%, which means you're probably not going to have enough money. You're going to have to take more than 4%. And even if you look at the median balance, you are looking at less than $10,000 a year that you're taking out of this 401k to use it over that 30-year period. So how can we really combat this? How can we boost those balances in the 401k? Now, of course, if you have money concerns like I do, I don't want any issues. I don't want to run out of money during retirement. But for a lot of people, almost 50% of Americans, they are going to run out of money before retirement is concluded or at the time that they do pass away. So if your balances are falling short, we have 4 steps that you can actually do for the 401k, boosting these up with number one, making those savings accounts, the 401ks, an absolute priority. If you're funneling money into a lot of other goals, saving for college, even going on vacations, you might want to redirect those funds, even if it is kind of short term. Kids, of course, can borrow for school. You have to have a runway and you have to have time to build wealth. And of course, you can't take loans out during retirement because most people don't have income with debt to income to actually qualify for loans. So it is about investing in the stock market, but building up and buying those ETFs so you can build that nest egg quicker and faster than you ever have before. Now, of course, taking advantage of any help that is available, government subsidies, retirement, really putting in the contributions into your 401ks, into your IRAs, any tax deductible accounts, of course, are going to go ahead and rack up those balances. And of course, if there is a 401k match, this is the time you want to go above and beyond it. If they're offering you 4%, maybe you do 8, maybe you do 10, maybe you're going crazy and you want to put 15 in there because you know during retirement, you're going to need that money. And of course, understanding your goals. If you haven't set your retirement goal, today is the day, guys. After you're done watching this video, you'll need roughly 80% of your salary to live on. That, of course, is a very quick and simple approach. But according to retirement professionals, 80% of it. So if you think about this, and again, kind of breaking down the math in my head, if I'm making $100,000 a year, I need 80% of my final salary year to go ahead and live. That gives me 80K. So out of that, let's say, for instance, Social Security is supplementing about 35 of that. So 35 of my 80K leaves a lot of money on the table. That is going to have to be provided from this 401k. So again, when you think about that 4% rule, you're looking at probably an 8% rule to actually subsidize your income at that 80% marker to actually reach that 80,000, because you're talking roughly a $40,000 gap that you're going to have in retirement. And that is only at 80% of your salary, guys. If you're a high earner, that 80% of course is going to change. The amount you have to have in these investment accounts are going to make a big difference. And of course, my biggest pet peeve, automate the savings, automate the 401k, automate the IRAs. This has to be automated, especially when you start getting to kind of the middle of your life. When you're in your 40s, you have to make sure, because you're very, very likely, or essentially less likely to miss those retirement contributions in those 401k accounts. And you have to make sure, guys, that you are maxing them out to a point where you can. Anything that you can put extra into these accounts are going to retire, because you also have to remember, when you get to that 401k, when you get to that retirement, it is not really the D-Day. It is not the final day that you are here. You still have estimated another 30 years of growth. 30 years are within the stock market, within those IRAs, those 401ks. They still have the ability to grow during retirement. And the point is to get the nest egg to honestly the size where you don't have to worry about taking out 4% or 6%, because you're not touching your initial investment and the balances in those accounts are growing faster than you actually are taking the money out. This is, again, a whole thing that we've seen over on Dave Ramsey that was talking about never touching the golden goose, but always taking out the eggs, meaning if I have $1 million in a portfolio, taking my 4% every year, so taking 40,000 out of that year to supplement that 100,000 income that I'm living at 80%, would be about on par if you had $1 million portfolio. And again, if you're thinking about numbers, and Americans are saying 1.46 million, if we're sitting on that 4% taken out of there, of course, going to make a big, big difference. If you can take 60 grand out of there every year, never touching the 1.5 million that you have in there would make a big difference. Now, of course, when it comes to retirement, when it comes to 401k, do not get discouraged with what is going on. You have to be a step above. You have to focus on this. Honestly, there are a lot of misconceptions. I hear a lot of stuff like 401ks are bad, they're evil, IRAs don't work. They work as long as they're invested properly. 401ks, IRAs, investment accounts will do incredibly well in the market over an extended amount of time. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.